Hello and welcome to the first bulletin. I'm Scott with Hi-Lux Optics. In today's program, Wild West Duels. How real were they? Before we get into that, some local topics. We'll be at SHOT Show, now less than a month away. Booth number 15056. Stop on by to take a peek at our latest creations, including new Malcolm scopes, our latest modern long-range offerings, and even our new spotting scope. We'll be there all week. I'll also invite you to check out some of Ohio Hammer and Lever's latest posts on Instagram. A longtime shooter of old wood guns, he's got more than a few vintage firearms that'll have you updating your Christmas lists. Santa, if you're listening, I'd like an 1874 Sharps and 4570. And now to our main story. Wild West quick draw duels. Did they really happen? To set the stage, let's step back more than 150 years to the year 1865. The stage is the town square of Springfield, Missouri. The parties involved are Wild Bill Hickok, then a scout for the Union Army, and Davis Tutt, a local gambler and Confederate Army veteran. I'll skip over much of their shared history, including Tutt's sister and Hickok, Hickok's girlfriend and Tutt, Tutt's payments and coaching to local gamblers to combat Hickok at cards, and so forth. Eventually, their tale comes to a head when Tutt takes Hickok's sentimental gold pocket watch as collateral for a gambling debt. After yet more humiliation, Hickok got wind that Tutt would be wearing the watch in the middle of the town square, to goad Hickok further. Hickok indeed felt quite humiliated. He had cleaned and loaded his 6 shooters the previous night, anticipating a confrontation. At 10 a.m., Tutt appeared at the town square with the watch in hand. The two gentlemen squared up against each other and negotiated. Hickok really wanted his watch back, but wouldn't pay the new, higher price. The two men went out for a drink together, and Tutt later left. Finally, at 6 p.m., Tutt returned to the square with the pocket watch. Hickok approached with his Colt Navy in hand. He cocked it, holstered it, and warned Tutt not to cross the square with the watch. Tutt did not cross the square, but did get his hand ready on his own sidearm. After a moment's hesitation, they drew. Hickok supported his barrel on his opposite forearm. Finally, they both fired at nearly the same moment. At a distance of 75 yards, even modern handguns might face some trouble with accuracy. The distance likely saved Hickok. Tutt, however, took a bullet between the ribs. He cried out, "Boys, I'm killed," then ran to the porch of the local courthouse, and then back out into the street. It was there that he finally collapsed and died. After a 3-day trial for manslaughter, Hickok was acquitted under the rule of a fair fight. Several weeks later, a writer from Harper's would seek out Hickok to turn his tale into legend. It would have been just news, except that Hickok was not overly fond of reporters, and facts had to be made up to fill the narrative. Thus, the legend was born. What you have just heard was one of the few true duels of Wild West history. At a distance of 75 yards, 2 men each fired a single shot under the eyes of 4 witnesses. While Hollywood and the occasional novel have made much of the duel at high noon, we forget that pioneers in the Old West were every bit as fond of life as we are today. They would not have been keen on standing 10 paces away and firing from the hip. The best bet, when possible, was to talk. Some rather unscrupulous persons might try an ambush, to which the answer inevitably would be a shotgun and running for cover. Others would stay far away, using a rifle and maybe a new Malcolm telescope. Shootouts with revolvers did occur, but were typically spur of the moment. People would run for cover. They'd shoot around corners or over the top of a rock. They do everything in their power to not be 20 feet of open ground away from someone trying to shoot them. Even more surprising, a quick hip shot was not as significant as you'd expect. Developing that skill takes time and ammunition that, even by today's standards, would be expensive. One old adage had a shot of alcohol worth a shot for your firearm. That would currently put each round at $5 to $10, or more if you wanted to get fancy. In truth, at that time, 1,000 pre-packed cartridges cost anywhere from a week's worth of wages for .22 long to more than a month's for rifles. The average cowboy earned around $1 per day. A 1,000-round box of .38 long cost $18. Most firearm owners did not have the spare cash or inclination to waste months of wages in perfecting a hip-fire maneuver. Instead, they would practice drawing quickly and aiming purposefully. I'm sorry to say that the tall tales and cinematic moments are largely just that. While I can't say that the Wild West was the rootinest, tootinest place for a duelist, I can share a couple of other notable duels. In the Long Branch Saloon of Dodge City, Kansas, a long-standing argument between Frank Loving and Levi Richardson would come to a head. Frank had married the owner of the bar not long before. He claimed that Levi was making advances on his wife. The two would occasionally argue over this, at one point developing into a fistfight. Finally, in 1879, Levi was ready to finish the matter. He stormed into the bar, hoping to find Frank. Frank wasn't present, so Levi settled down to play poker. At 9 p.m., Frank finally strolled in, and the two sat down at a table across from each other. Quite soon, both stood up shouting. Levi drew first, so Frank drew as well. Levi fired 5 times, while Frank fired 6. From the meager distance of a table width, Levi was hit across the chest, side, and arm. Frank, meanwhile, received a minor graze on the back of one hand. Frank was arrested almost immediately and released a couple of days later under a ruling of self-defense. He was 19 at the time. On a night in 1887, a saloon owner named Luke Short and a former sheriff named Jim Courtright were feeling quite unfriendly towards one another. Jim was demanding protection money from Luke, a racket he employed across the town with great success. Luke was rather unhappy at being asked to pay. The two argued while walking through town. Jim, prone to anger, suddenly reached for the pistol in his pocket. At a distance of 3 or 4 feet, Luke managed to draw and fire even quicker. He shot Jim 5 times, one of which jammed Jim's revolver. Luke Short escaped unscathed and had his manslaughter charge later dismissed. In the words of Wyatt Earp, the most important lesson I learned was the winner of gunplay usually was the one who took his time. The second was that, if I hoped to live on the frontier, I would shun flashy trick shooting as I would poison. I did not know a really proficient gunfighter who had anything but contempt for the gun fanner, or the man who literally shot from the hip. That's all the news we have for today. I hope you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and many rounds in your stockings. This is Scott from Hi-Lux, signing off.